Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone XR is the least expensive iPhone that Apple sells new that has Face ID. And so I wanted to help you decide if you should pick one up in 2021 since Apple is still selling it brand new. And the first thing is, I think Apple is selling this still because it sold so well. In fact, the first year or so, it sold about 46 million phones. So this was one of the best-selling phones for quite some time, and I think it still sells quite well due to its price, and it offers a lot of value, but there's some shortcomings too. And the first thing is the price. I think it sells well now, especially because it's $499 to start with. So $499 for 64 gigs of storage, up to $549 for 128 gigabytes of storage. That's what Apple currently offers it for new. So that's $100 less than we had in 2020. And like I said, it's the least expensive phone that they offer with Face ID, but you do have the second generation iPhone SE, which is a little bit less if you prefer Touch ID. So you've got these two options on the low end as far as Apple's pricing goes. And I think the iPhone XR offers a lot of value, and it's a very durable phone. Over the years that I've had it, it's been stored in a bag, sometimes with a case, sometimes without. And as you can see, the finish is held up really well. There is one spot here where it seems to have nicked some of the finish off. We're down to the aluminum, and this must have just banged into something that was metal because this is pretty durable in general. If you have a case on it, you can expect this to last really well. I've had no issues with the ports. Everything's held up really well, and it's proved to be a very durable phone. It does have glass on the back and front, but it seems to be fairly scratch resistant. Not as scratch resistant as, say, the ceramic shield in the iPhone 12. I think some of that has to do with the display sticking up above the edge a little bit, but in general it's held up well. And if I turn the phone off here, or the display off, you can see there's a few light scratches on it. Some of them are deeper than others, but that's basically just from using it, putting it in my pocket, putting it in a bag, for example, and then up here there's a scratch as well. So it's not impervious to scratches. It holds up pretty well, but not as well as some of the newer phones. Also, you can see it has Face ID. It unlocks nice and quick. There's not really any slowdowns there. I think it's nice and fast. As you pick it up, it will unlock just by looking at it, and a lot of people like this. Now, again, like I said, if you don't, then you'll have to pick something that's a little bit older, like the iPhone 8 Plus, for example, or even the iPhone SE that has better specs internally. However, Face ID will work great for many people, especially with the upcoming updates that will bring Apple Watch Unlock with a mask and Face ID. So I think that will be great for a lot of people if that was one of the problems you were having. Now, the display is probably the most controversial thing, and that is because it's a 6.1-inch display with a resolution that's in between 720p and 1080p, or HD resolution, so 1792 by 828 pixels, but the thing people really should be focusing on is the pixel density of 326 pixels per inch. That's the same pixel density as we get with the iPhone SE second generation, and because it's an LCD display, it's gotten a lot of flack because it's not a 4K display or a 2K display. The pixel density, though, is really what matters. As you get close to the display, it looks really good, it's crisp, and in fact, I've compared it with OLED displays such as the iPhone 11 Pro Max, the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and side by side, most people that I've shown cannot tell the difference. If they can tell the difference, it's usually the blacks or the vibrant colors of an OLED compared to, say, the iPhone XR's LCD. Because it's an OLED, you're going to have the pixels shut off where there's black, and you're going to have more vibrant colors, and it's brighter. In fact, the iPhone XR goes up to about 625 nits, and technically is HDR still, but it's not as bright as the 1200 nits or so, almost double that with the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So in sunlight, it's going to be a little bit better as far as the newer phones, but for most people, you won't be able to tell the difference. It has great viewing angles, and it can play 4K YouTube, even though the display is still below 1080p. So if I go into YouTube, for example, and we go to our resolutions, you can see 2160p HDR. So it's capable of playing HDR content. 2160p is 4K, and it will play that without a problem. It won't go as bright as a 12 Pro or a 12, for example, but it does look good. So if I hit play here, you can see that it's on HDR, and it's nice and bright. And it's nice and loud as far as the speakers. So if I turn these up,
hopefully you can see it on this video, but there's some amazing brights and darks in this display.
And so it goes nice and loud. The speakers work well. They have great stereo sound at the top and bottom. And just in general, the display combined with the speakers is a nice experience if you're viewing something such as a movie or playing a game. Performance with the A12 Bionic that's inside here is very fast. Anyone I know that has it has not really complained of its speed. If you're just scrolling, maybe you're going back and forth between pages, or you're opening the camera or going back out, it's nice and fast. If you wanted to play a game, for example, we'll go to Minecraft just to show you how quickly it loads. If you want to use this for a game, we'll wait for it here just a moment. And you'll see I haven't opened this in quite some time, so it does have to reload, but I wanted to give you an idea of what it's like to load or play a game. We'll go into it, give it just a moment here, go to My World, and we'll let it load. So it will take just a moment as it does whatever it's doing here in the background. We'll hit Proceed. And I wanted to show you in real time to give you an idea of what it's like. It will take a moment, and some of this will depend on your internet connection, depending if you're joining online games, of course. But if you're playing things like Minecraft or Among Us or Call of Duty, it's going to be plenty fast as soon as it loads. It may not load as fast as other phones, but let's give it just a moment here. And so we're in, and as you can see, the world is loaded, and we can just zip along. The frame rates are nice and smooth. And one of the advantages you get when you're using this, for example, because the resolution is a little bit lower, you're actually going to get better battery life. So this phone, when it came out, and it still holds true today with the updates, has had really great battery life. 7+ hours of screen on time, which will usually get you through a day without any problem whatsoever. So if I go to the battery, this phone was not my main phone over the past couple of years, so the battery health is at 100%, but you can expect 80% after a couple of years, but it just depends how you use it. So let me show you examples of battery life over time from a viewer, for example. Now, thanks to Jason for sending in his battery usage on his main iPhone XR that he uses regularly. And as you can see, there's some new battery usage since he updated his phone. It started over, and he has 3 hours and 37 minutes of screen on time, 4 hours and 23 minutes of screen off time, and he's only used about 50% of his battery, which means he would get about 7 hours of screen on time. So it's actually got great battery life for the phone. It will easily get you through a day without a problem, and it supports wireless charging and fast charging. So about 30 minutes will get you about 50% of your battery, and you can use wireless charging. You can use MagSafe, but you won't get the faster wireless charging, but you will be able to charge wirelessly with this up to about 7.5 watts. So it does support that, which is always really nice. And so this particular phone also has great reception. For some reason, this seemed to have better reception than the iPhone 11 Pro Max that I used full-time during the time frame this was released. It has decent Wi-Fi, no issues there. While it doesn't support the latest Wi-Fi standards, such as Wi-Fi 6, it's plenty fast with the previous versions, and cellular seems to be pretty good. It does not support 5G, but it does support 4G with dual SIMs, as you can see here. So you can have one main SIM with an eSIM secondary if you want to do that. And it seems to have decent reception with its aluminum frame. So I didn't have a whole lot of call drops or anything like that. And speed seems to be pretty decent. Let's check speed test. I'll turn off Wi-Fi so we can test this. And we'll hit next, allow. And let's see what the speed is. So we'll go ahead and speed test it. This is on T-Mobile. I have a T-Mobile SIM in here, and you'll see speed is decent in my area with 2 bars of service. So we're getting up to 20 megabits per second. You will get a faster speed with, say, 5G, for example, in my area, but 25 down is not bad. So we're hitting almost 27 down. And then pretty slow upload speeds, but that's just the area I'm in. About 2 to 3 megabits per second as far as upload speed, but it really depends on where you're at. But like I said, reception in general has been good with this. Now, one area where I've really enjoyed using the iPhone XR is its camera. The camera, maybe because of its lens arrangement, looks really good when you're recording video. In fact, I've used this to record a lot of videos when I'm filming outside. The one thing you don't get that the new phones get is HDR, but you do get up to 4K 60. So if I go into the camera, for example, go to video, you'll see we have HD. We'll tap on this, we'll change it to 4K. And then, like I said, we have up to 60 frames per second. If you're using 30 frames per second, you'll be able to use the neural engine to better sort of understand your environment and it looks a little bit better, but you can go up to 30 frames per second and it looks great. And so this is a camera I've used a lot of times for video, and the photos are great too. The one thing that some people complain about is it doesn't have a telephoto lens or ultra wide lens. The ultra wide is a disadvantage, but the telephoto is not as big of a deal as you might think. On the newer phones, such as the iPhone 12, for example, when you zoom in to 2.5x, for example, on the 12 Pro Max, it actually will use the main camera still. So you've got 3 lenses on the newer phones. And if I go to the camera, you go to photo, I'll put my finger over it here. You'll see my fingers over the lens. We'll tap on 2.5x. It's still using that same camera because it can get better resolution with the sensor. This is the same sort of thing that's done on the XR when you zoom in a little bit. So it actually looks pretty good until you go to about 5x, for example. Then it gets a little blurry, doesn't look as good, but it's still decent when you're zoomed in. You'll see the detail of the keyboard here is pretty good. So it's not amazing, but it's better than most people would think. The one area where the XR lacks a little bit these days is with the FaceTime camera. This is only a 7 megapixel camera, and if I go to video, it only records in 1080p. The microphones are pretty decent, as you can hear now, but the overall quality is just not that of, say, the iPhone 11 or the newer phones, because those record in 4K. This is only 1080p. And so that's one area where you have a little bit of a disadvantage, but you still have the ability to use things like Animoji, for example. If I go into messages, you can use the Animoji. It will track your face. If you want to play around with that, you can do that, and it will track your face and mouth movements. So it's working just fine without a problem. And if you like all of these features, you'll have those. So you'll have everything that's in the latest phones, along with augmented reality. Now, another thing to consider between these devices is PWM, and this is why a lot of people stay with LCD displays over OLED, and that's how they control brightness. An LCD display does not flicker the display on iPhones to control the brightness, where an OLED display does. By flickering the display faster or slower, it controls brightness, and this can cause some people to feel nauseated or cause eye strain. This is fairly common. It's about 1 in 10 people, and it usually affects those that can see higher frame rates. This actually affects myself when I was using some of the older phones. They really affect my eyes and cause a lot of strain. With the iPhone XR, you don't get any of that. So it's actually a little bit better for your eyes in what I'm finding and using different LCD displays. And so that leads me to, should you buy an iPhone XR in 2021? And that really depends on a couple things. Do you really want the best cameras? Do you want the best specs? Or do you just want a reliable phone that works fine, has iOS on it, and will get the job done? This is really the workhorse, I think, with all the latest features. You're not missing out on any features, but you just won't have the latest of everything. I would say that if you could spend an extra $100, I would go for the iPhone 11 at this point, because you get an extra camera, you have a little bit better video, and better video on the forward-facing camera as well. The screens are identical, but you have all of the latest specs, and you also get better IP resistance, which means IP68 up to 2 meters for 30 minutes with the 11, or just IP67 1 meter for 30 minutes with the XR. So you do have a couple advantages that I think are worth that extra $100, but if the camera doesn't matter to you, the FaceTime camera doesn't matter to you, the XR will actually get a little bit better battery life. So if you're more concerned about battery life and durability and just not having something that's that expensive, where you could spend maybe buy 2 of the XR for the price of the 12, for example, this would be the best phone to get at that price range, especially if you can pick one up, say, at a carrier that gives you a deal, maybe free with a trade-in or something like that. I think it's an excellent choice, either that way or used. It's still great. But let me know what you think about it in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.